Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of exponential technologies, business innovation, entrepreneurship, thought leadership, enterprise IT security, neuroscience, philosophy, personal development, and more. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Bill Murphy, your host of the Red Zone podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Oleg Konovalov. He's ranked by Thinkers360 as a #1 global thought leader on culture and by Marshall Goldsmith Thinkers50 as a #1 global leading coach. This was a fascinating conversation as Oleg is an international consultant and author of 4 best-selling books, sharing his research and understanding of the strategic needs of entrepreneurs and managers in the areas of corporate culture, leadership, and corporate diagnostics, especially while working across many different cultures. And in this episode, Oleg shares some of his really interesting stories and insights about the old versus the new role of leaders in today's corporate environment. Like, one of the statements was he thinks 0.1% of leaders have a vision and only 3% are good at decision making. But why? That's what you learn when you listen today. You'll love every second of this interview with Oleg as he reveals strong insight about organizational leadership and culture. And as you listen to this podcast, continue to expand your knowledge bank and read more from his most recent book, Leaderology. And a couple of key points I thought were really interesting is you can't create a vision by making something complex, and you're not creative by copying others. And the shift in leadership towards systemic approaches and old models aren't working, as I mentioned. So you need to surround yourself with experts and mentors. Super important in today's age. It's very difficult as IT leaders impacting business to think that you're going to be the sole harbinger of knowledge. You're going to have to reach deep into the organization and reach wide outside of yourself to accomplish the necessary mentors who are better than you to help you achieve yourself personally, what you want to do, and also within your organization. But the necessity of humility in leadership is important, and being curious as an amazing skill to cultivate. So welcome to my conversation with Oleg Konovalov. Thank you. Welcome to the show, Oleg. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to talk with you and share my experience with people. Thank you.
So this is great. It's great. And this is what I love is the stories that come from people like you that have this wide experience of being in organizations and being a thought leader for making change. I think it's important to be able to get this message down to people's cell phones, get it down to where they're listening, whether they're doing the dishes or whether they're driving into work that day or taking a train. So that this is going to be a lot of fun. So tell me about your story. Like, how did you get? I know you are in Russia right now. We're talking while you're in Moscow. Tell me about your journey to this point. Like, what was it like growing up, and how did you? What were some of the formative major influences for you that helped form your thinking?
I could define myself as an explorer. I love exploring new things. I lived for many years in Arctic, so every time you go into the wild nature for fishing or just like for camping trip, you're exploring new terrains, and you're still curious what's over there, over the horizon. It's one side of the story. But another thing is, when you're exploring, you grow. Here comes a point which you just mentioned, change. But what does it mean, change? Change is creating value again and again. When we talk change, we mainly assume that to bend something, just like to twist and it will be different. In a good scenario, change is ability to create a new value and new meanings using own potentials. And that is very different And that's always fascinates me. The way I see these things, I'm very curious and very keen to create solutions, not just discussions. As a thought leader, my duty is not to create a content, as people often assume, but to offer a solution which is bulletproof, idiot-proof, simple, and people could apply it immediately and get this change in terms of creating value for the company, for people that works for a company, and for the customers.
So when you say content, are you referring to, so you're saying don't just put more information out into the world, content in that way, put solution out into information?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly, because even if I'll put something on LinkedIn, what I learned, instead of putting, that's a picture of me staying by a waterfall, it's meaningless. It's nothing. It's just a waste of a space, a waste of the human time. But when you're saying, okay, guys, here's a problem and here's a solution in a couple of sentences, that's a difference. Because you offer at least, or you're triggering a chance for people to think about something from different perspective, to evaluate and see themselves. I'm very keen to help people to be explorers as well, explorers of new opportunities.
So when you were in the Arctic, you said you grew up in the Arctic. And
yes.
I'm assuming Arctic of Russia, the northern.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, northern territories. And that's fascinating because, it's pure, it's wild, but it's human. Human in terms when you feel being a human. You're not surrounded by concrete blocks. You're surrounded by nature. And that strongly affected my approach to looking at organizations as biological creatures. Because we can't create anything more clever than ourselves. Neither in artificial intelligence or in a way we build organizations or in a way we interact with each other. We are still humans.
So let me ask about that, because that's I love that statement. We can't create something more intelligent than ourselves. So one of the things I think leaders struggle with is increasing complexity and their mind space that they are approaching problem sets. So I think Einstein said it, that we can't solve a problem from the same mindset that created it.
Yes.
And I don't know if that was correctly attributed to him, but whoever said it, it was smart. And I'm curious, how do you help leaders create a space for themselves that's different than the problem so that they're not just exacerbating the problem, but really looking at it from a new angle?
One of the leader's role is to create vision for what he or she does for people. And vision is an elegant thinking of complex things. You can't create vision making it complex. Right? Even if we look at whatever the airplane, Airbus or Boeing, doesn't matter. It's hugely complicated piece of engineering. But it still consists of elements which are simple in their basic understanding. And then put together, people understand how to build them. And so we're flying across continents. When we do software, we know that some software is extremely difficult to understand, difficult to interact, and some of the softwares are really productive and making customers or users' life very simple. So the same happens in an organization. I had a meeting this early morning with one of the potential clients, which is a big bank, which strongly betting on online banking. We're using all this software, but they can't implement it effectively. I'm not very clever in software, don't get me wrong. I'm not pretending. But what I'm good at, I'm saying, guys, let's look how your team works before you are making or expecting this system to be effective. And it's appeared that the leadership team is strongly fragmented.
Oh, okay.
So for them, a software causing even more problems than they had before, because in a good sense, it reveals their weaknesses, being or expecting to be a team, one strong whole team. So how you could consider in your human body that left hand would be arguing with right hand? But we face those things in an organization every day on a different levels. And that doesn't make us better. Another thing is, what I'm arguing also about, when we're flying across the continents, we are facing a jet lag, right? Yes. But we know, for instance, if I'm flying from Moscow to San Diego, 11 hours jet lag, but within 11 days, I would be all right because I need a day to recover 1 hour time difference. Okay, but we know how to handle it. But the problem is at the moment that we are facing a huge challenge of a mind lag. We are trying to build future using an old paradigm and old thinking. So we're dragging old mistakes into that future. It's all right to do new mistakes in a new reality, but it's not good to use old mistakes in a new reality because we're paying for old mistakes every day more and more.
So what is an example of old mistakes? I knew your new book, Leaderology.
Yeah.
You talk about the 14 pathologies in an organization with leaders. Is that part of the mistakes?
Firstly, we never looked at organizations in a way how we could treat them systematically. At least. Before even going to this classification, what we've been taking, in general, we're looking at organization as something meaningless we shouldn't be treated. In this sense, it's just a piece of paper which is called Certificate of Incorporation. Okay? But if we talk about people which are working in an organization and behaving differently towards each other, that we could see where the problems come from, pathologies or diseases. For instance, if we talk about competitors' dependency syndrome, we, instead of thinking boldly and developing something unique as a business, company copying, they do copy and paste of how competitors do things. If it's a war of discount, they're going into this war and discounting their products. If competitors put some kind of a big poster on a wall, they will put exactly the same on a wall as well. So more or less, we're copying each other instead of creating something new. Well, it was good old days, but not good today. For instance, is it human? It's purely human. If we talk about cross syndrome, when one department is blaming another department, for instance, sales department blaming operations department or HR department. So at the end, organization become bended because in both departments, people are not effective. Is it human? It's purely human.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that there's these old, and I love that copying part. I'm going to come back to that in a moment because I also was reading that section and you talked about self-awareness at a corporate level. And the greatest sentence, I yelled it out to my team actually, because I thought, gosh, this would be a great title for like one of the sub blog posts that we may steal. But a dog is not born to climb on trees. And immediately when that happened, I was like, my mind flashed to my own business. And I call them entrepreneurial seizures. And I'm sure within larger organizations, I call them entrepreneurs. Like there's people there that have entrepreneurial tendencies, but they're not, tip of the spear, classic startup entrepreneur, but they deploy entrepreneurial tendencies within their organizations. But when they come up with an idea, isn't an idea that it's a dog on trying to climb a tree and really should be carved out to be tested at outside the company where the core of the company is going to get threatened by this new idea, but the company needs to test new ideas. Even if it starts out as a dog climbing on a tree, maybe the market needs a dog on a tree, but it has to be tested. And I'm just curious for you, how do you deal with companies that are sort of at crossroads with self-awareness related to who they are?
Yes, your idea, your approach is perfectly fine if you act within your capacities or the purpose of your organization. But when we think what organization is, how they're different, for instance, when producer trying to become a location-dependent company, it doesn't work, or vice versa.
What is a producer?
for instance, you are strongly involved in producing security software.
Okay.
Right? You're a producer. You wouldn't be the best in selling it, but you would employ people who could do it for you, and you have distributors of your product. Okay? So as soon as you are experimenting, putting a dog on a tree, but within your range of capacities, nothing wrong with that, because you're looking for solutions. But if you will try experimenting opening shops in terms of how to get your license or code delivered to the people in some kind of a way, I don't think it would be very clever.
Yeah, so basically, if you're gonna do retail distribution of software through if you're trying to distribute your software through a distribution network and you're just testing those modes out versus a direct sales force, that would be different than launching a retail store's.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, having self-awareness to where that would strain an organization and is what you're saying with taking old paradigms and potentially looking at new ones. Just be self-aware of what you're putting the stresses on your internal systems.
Absolutely. Another good example, which we are facing all of us daily when we are dealing with banks, either being their clients or being their partners, or, when we do some kind of a work together with them, we could see tendency from them being knowledge-dependent organization moving into some kind of, they're losing their identity. They are strongly blaming a strong change towards tech solutions or online banking and things like that. But what happens? Banks are losing their knowledge on how to create the money, and they're trying to blame and replace it with different software solutions, which are not as easy to understand and not always as easy to understand. So they're experimenting in the wrong field. Instead of exercising their knowledge on how to help people to create more wealth, they are exercising themselves as being an IT producers to some extent. And that is harmful.
So you're saying that a bank is clearly a lot of stresses on the banking system because you have different demands for online banking, you have cryptocurrencies, you have FINRA. There's a lot of potential current disruption and future disruption. And so what you're saying is the models they're testing, you're observing that's not the best way to go through it? Okay.
No, we are losing in such cases, we are losing our effectiveness. So the dog still could climb a tree, but would it be as efficient as a cat?
Not nearly, right.
And plus, at the same time, we expect this dog to catch a fish, and that would be very different.
So you're saying the modern approaches for the modern leader versus the legacy leader. So a legacy leader, I'm 50, so I was
56.
Okay. So we've still got a lot of gas in the tank, and a lot of value to create. But in the 20 years ago, if you were 50 or 56, you were at the end of your career. I look at it quite the opposite. I look at it like we have another career left. And that's an impact at an employee level that I don't think people really truly understand how much living they still have to do. And their question is, how do you be productive with a bunch of old archetypes in your brain about how business was run? And then you're saying, listen, don't bring that legacy into the new world, create value from this new paradigm. And what would that be?
The simplest lesson I learned, thanks to, to people from whom I could learn, every new project, every new stage of life, learn as very small child. Because a small child learns everything from new and quite quickly. And this is what I'm supposed to do even at my age, because everything changes. We're having this conversation now. We're not changing past. We're not changing present. We talk with you now how to change future. And so we are building it now, putting little bricks into it. So I must learn every day how to build this new reality from scratch. that keeps my mind working very actively. That keeps me, I wouldn't say younger, but at least still productive and relevant.
Because you're learning in the present how to impact the future, and you think people are constantly thinking about the future, so they get stuck instead of just learning what's...
No.
Okay.
The difference is people often afraid of the future. They're thinking of it as something huge, unpredictable, scary, and surely uncertain. And therefore just they're looking at it, oh, it's a bad winter coming, Oh, it's, something incredible that we can't manage. No, make it simple. Be focused and learn, and you will handle it. Because that's a way to develop positive future, to look at it positively now, and it will be positive.
Yeah,
that's a bit different slice.
For sure. And I'm curious about how the learning models you're observing, and with culture in particular, it's funny, I got a report the other day from some new account managers that they had passed the training that this vendor had produced. And it's great training. And I said, well, that means they're about 5% more effective. And you think, well, why wouldn't, if they passed the training, they'd be 100% more effective? And I said, because it's been proven, and I've observed this, that there's zero correlation between this online video training and actual real world working with a customer. It's stunning to me. And then I read in your book, which I'm really getting to here, is you said the skills gap, you said 70% of learning comes from interacting with your peers at work. And,
yes.
And I was wondering if you could just go through that a little bit with me as it relates to culture and learning and what you're observing.
I noticed a huge difference between, for instance, Russian organizations and Western organizations. Because we have, let's call it, as software engineer, you will easily grasp it. We have 3 dimensions of knowledge transfer or knowledge sharing. A, it's subordinate sharing between leaders and subordinates and a team, for instance. We have horizontal approach. We are sharing everything with peers. And we have cognitive distance, which defines if we are too close, we're not hearing much each other, or if we are too distant, we're neither hearing each other. But what happens, the difference is in how subordinates are interacting with their leaders, how a team interacts with a leader. The more, call it, boss-dominant cultures, like, for instance, in Russia, they are not much interacting except orders. So how they're grabbing information or getting information, they're talking with peers. It does work in the US and in the UK, which is fairly similar, not into some extent, but the problem is leaders are not sharing much with their teams. They're still trying to keep their status quo at a certain level. They're afraid that if somebody would know as much as they are, they will, it will put their position into some kind of a jeopardy, instead of thinking on a broader picture that organization can't move further than a competence level of its people.
So you're saying the leaders in the UK, US, in Europe, the difference there. So you're saying in Russia, the boss-dominant culture typically, but even though it might be that type of a culture, there is sharing. There's quite a bit more sharing at the boss level to the subordinates in the team, and that works. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
okay.
It's better, but it's still not sufficient. Modern leaders still lack humility. Humility because they're afraid to show that they don't know something. They're more pretending that they know everything, and they're not allowing people to behave in the same way. You just mentioned a training, whereas only 5% is real outcome of it, which is exceptionally low. It's not efficient. And therefore, yes, I'm a big fan of physical trainings, when you could talk to people directly, because when you do webinar or you do online stuff, you don't have this, normal human feeling. You're losing it. But what's important is to trigger that humility in people, a craving for knowledge, curiosity, let them understand that I'm in the same shoes as they are. I'm learning as well. And if I don't know something, I would ask them to share it with me if they know. And that's important. That makes training more effective, much more effective.
I find it very interesting because, we talked about scaling knowledge, and it's almost like organizations these days, the competitive differentiator for many, especially, I believe most businesses now are digital businesses, or they might be a physical business disguised as a digital business on the back end. And our ability to scale learning across human teams, it can be a real differentiator. I think that I'd love to get your thoughts though on leadership right now when you truly don't know. Like right now, I love this concept of old paradigms don't transform into the new world. And if you can assume, like, our machines, our phones are smarter than us as humans. Like, we just don't know enough facts, but our phones can tell us the facts. But there's a difference between facts and being knowledgeable, or facts and wisdom. And so I'd love you to talk about your leaderology approach as what happens when you don't know, and you don't, like, most people want to be afraid. So how do you counteract the human tendency to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in jeopardy if I don't share, or I don't know the answer. But what if that's the new normal, that I don't know?
Modern leader is a knowledge bank holder or owner, right? He creates a knowledge bank or knowledge pool around himself. I need people, because how we're shifting a paradigm. Think for a moment, like even decade ago, or a couple of decades ago, or we're not talking even centuries, leaders were superiors to everyone. We expected them to know everything, and apprentices were apprentices. Today, leader is a knowledge bank holder, because, look, realistically, how many years you need to be at the CEO position to know everything which CEO should know? I don't know, 100 years or more.
Right.
I need a knowledge bank around myself, if I consider myself a leader, with people interacting, sharing that knowledge between them and with me, and me adding a lot into this knowledge pool. And then we grow together. As a leader, I can't grow at the people cost. I'm helping people to grow, and so growing myself in this instance.
Sure.
Knowledge is the best, or level of knowledge is the best indicator of how we are growing together. A team wins, not one from a team.
Yeah, I think that's actually that's a shift as well.
It is.
I mean, I was just interviewing a guy that said, like, how many Nobel Peace Prizes have been won by solo practitioners, solo scientists in recent years? And there's very few Einsteins out there right now. He said most of the big wins now in the Nobel Prize categories are won by teams.
Yeah, or people from across somebody from Japan, somebody from the US.
Correct, right.
It's absolutely, and it's normal. I'm talking every day, being, for instance, in Europe, I'm talking every day with somebody from the US or Canada or in China, because we're creating that knowledge pool together. And I'm helping people with their approaches, they're helping me with my approaches, and we are exchanging these things. What we exchange? Thoughts, knowledge, experience, so we're becoming stronger and stronger every day. So we could help others to become better. Because as a result, we are developing solutions. And that's a teamwork. And that's great to be in a teamwork. If you're arrogant to your team knowledge, you can't be a leader. No way. You're just a warden of a team.
A warden, okay, that's interesting.
Or some kind of a shepherd, which is saying, no, don't go left, don't go right. Just keep that way. That's it. What you would get? You would get ships.
I have a question for you. There's a theme that in different problems that pop up. I just gave a conference a couple weeks ago and was talking about building mentors and building mentorship outside your four walls. And this is at a leader level. And I said, what is both your personal and your business ambition? And I asked, okay, what are you personally a year from now? What defines success? 3 years from now, personally, what defines success? And I said the same thing company-wide. And I said, well, look at the 5 people around you, and not at the table, but your closest 5 people and what they've achieved and what they have done in business or personally. And I said, if they're at your level or below your level from what your ambition is, then how are you supposed to move to that next level? So as a basic theme was surround yourself with people that share your goals, share your ambitions, if not, and hopefully are way in front, so that you can learn a different model and a mode of thinking around problem solving. What are your thoughts to leaders that want to grow in that way? How would you answer that if people asked you?
I have a bit maybe weird approach, because the first question in this sense I'm asking is, okay, when people talk to me about success, and I'm asking, when you get into this success, what you will do with it? So the question is, what you will do with success you achieve?
What you will do with it, okay.
What you will do with this success? And here comes immediate reaction, because if people talk about money, they think, oh, I will buy a new house or a new car or whatever. That's it. It's done. It's gone. Because it's not about people, right? But if you talk about success, something, to survive in a horrible storm, is it a success? Yes. It's easy to give up and die rather than to survive. So in corporate world, you might invented something new through huge challenges, and that is success. People should clearly understand that success is being with people, acting for them, and that is the main purpose of leadership. Act for people, act together with people, and act for their needs. That defines the main stimulus of leadership.
You're saying leaders should think about acting for others as this main stimulus for leadership. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that would develop a new dimension of defining success. I had a very weird experience. I was sharing an exam in one of the business schools, and quite a young guy, he was quite weak on answering the questions, and it was oral exam. And he said, but I am a leader. I said, okay, man, tell me something. What's your people achieved under your leadership? He turned to me and said, you grumpy old guy. I said, okay, fine, go. Just like, boom, thank you. But that's a question. What is a success? You lay a red carpet for your people because you are a leader. They are not laying a red carpet for you. In this sense, you're just exploiting them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That is a real shift, because, and I really like that from an entrepreneur perspective. I was listening to a gentleman. He's actually from Belarus, but he's been here for many, many years in the U.S. And his philosophy, he's 1,000 people in his company. Someone said to him, well, what if my subordinates, my employees, my team members aren't doing what I tell them to do, and yada, 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 yada. And he goes, listen, you work for them, because I never have problems with employees because I believe that I work for them. That was a big shift, or it was a sort of like a mini bomb in my brain. I'm like, he's absolutely right. He goes, it doesn't matter if you're the leader. He goes, the leader takes all the heat, and you work for the employee. And it's a subtle but powerful psychological shift. At least it was for me. So I love that.
Look simply, if you are a leader, you're defining a vision of a company or where we are going. From that very moment, you are giving a carte blanche check to your people to make decisions within their boundaries of that vision, develop everything within that vision. So they are value creators. Respect them. Help them to create even more value. So support them.
Yeah, I do love that concept, Oleg. I think that is fantastic.
Thank you.
What exactly do you mean? There was a part in the book that had a interesting quote, and I really liked it, but it was somewhat of a it teased your brain. I wanted to see what you thought about it. So it was a cartoon that said corporate problems are usually the result of the leader's action or inaction. And I thought, that's interesting. So clearly it's easy to see that a leader that's inactive or is not acting, I can see that makes a lot of sense. But then when you balance both together, some leaders can be overactive. And so I'm wondering where you were going with that cartoon.
I believe you and also all of us met many leaders who are running, for instance, between different meetings, meaningful or meaningless, depends of how lucky they are, but mainly meaningless meetings without paying any attention what the company is doing at that moment, which still could be called action. They love people to produce a lot of sweat without any kind of meaning behind that hard work, because they can't articulate clearly what's a task, what's a goal, just do something. Is it action? Yes, action. Only 3% of leaders, in my view, are really good at decision making. So the rest of 97% could be blamed for procrastinating because they don't know what to do, and they're even not allowing themselves to think that if you can't take a decision, delegate it to somebody else who can. That is inaction. It's the simplest examples.
That's it. You're saying that is action or inaction?
Yes, that's
action. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Whatever we do without me. We know Nokia went down for a simple reason, not responding to a market changes in terms of shifting from to a software platforms, which is end up with a big boom. Was it inaction? Yes, it was pure inaction.
Yes, and completely. You're talking about Nokia, prior with the world dominant phone manufacturer.
Yeah, you mentioned training. Okay, it's a good topic. It's a good theme for people to keep going. But reality shows that despite of a huge number of trainings being provided every day across the globe, some companies never train their staff, or train maybe once in 5 years. Is it inaction? Yes, it is in action. It's not action at all. How you would cope? And such company would end up in troubles and blaming everyone else for such a mistake. But this is leader's fault.
So have you ever read the Tao Te Ching? The Tao Te Ching?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so it's fantastic. I love it because it's it's an ancient Chinese, Lao Tzu apparently. Well, they're not really sure but Lao Tzu they think wrote it. But it's basically a book of poetry, but very short vignettes. And the concept of the Tao is, action and inaction, action and inaction, and in discernment. And it's interesting in a modern world that at least we're being sold that things are going so quickly, so fast.
Here comes a very interesting point, because I've been thinking and actually even trying to research it into some kind of in-depth. And what I have learned myself, action and inaction should be balanced in a way how we realize, call it the grain or frequency of changes. In a time of a slow but strong changes, we should follow the changes. But if at the time of a very, sudden, short changes, we should keep stable and patient. Because we will break our teeth on a small and meaningless changes. Before people saying, oh yeah, we should change this because our competitors did, or some kind of a report even in a well-respected media says so, it doesn't mean the actual change is happened. Just watch the trend at least within your industry or within a business society, and keep it as a tendency.
Yeah, that's a good point, because just because VR is here doesn't mean it's useful. And, we don't see people walking around with VR headsets right now and at home, and kids aren't on VR headsets at home playing games. They're still, so we don't have to strain after something that is here, but we have time to articulate, because it will be here at scale in 5 to 10 years. So if we truly want to take advantage, we don't have to act fast on that. But there's some things that, what I like is this concept of action and inaction for decision making, because if 3% of leaders in your thoughts are good decision makers, how are they delegating decision making to teams would be an interesting question. Versus, are they themselves trying to solve the problem themselves?
What stops us to delegate something important to other people? We are control freaks. We believe that we should control everything, even something beyond our capacity. It's one thing. And then I'm always arguing that control is an illusion. You can't control everything. Control is a social code which is policed by those people who are involved in a certain area of application of a certain operation, for instance, or a company, right? If all the people are in charge of controlling something and policing how it's done, that is a real control. Otherwise, it's an illusion. So when you delegate control to people, you should clearly understand that these people are really interested in what you do or what company does.
So are you saying that the antidote to being a control freak is to understand that control is an illusion? And what were you saying, that what would the team's perception be?
Yeah, the team perception will be team saying, yes, for us it is important, and so we'll take care of it, all of us, as a shared control function, as a shared code of acting.
I see. And I often think there's a difference between power and control. And I think a leader has to understand that giving up control of something is not necessarily giving up power. And
absolutely.
And so it's almost like that, for me, that has always worked as an interesting approach to, because I don't want the control over all those areas. It's too complex. And there's too many brains here that could solve this particular problem if I just gave up that control. But it does not mean that I've delegated power. No.
And power or influence, it's a time factor, how you affect people's reaction at a certain period of time. Because if somebody left the company, do you have a power or influence over this person? No. So it's compact of time and influence.
I like that. I hadn't thought about that. The influence is a great. You said 3% of businesses.
Decision, yeah. But at the moment, I'm working on a new big project. I'm looking to reveal a real nature of what vision is, how to create it, how to construct it, and how to execute it effectively. And what happens, we face even a bigger problem. I found that 0.1% of leaders have vision.
0.1?
Yes. None. Next to zero. Yes, we have dreams, we have ambitions, but very few people can really clearly articulate what they do. A good job I brought in leaderology a discussion of, or triggered this discussion of what vision is in terms of how it's constructed, the 6 elements of it. But so I'm lucky enough to have access to really bright visionaries from across the globe. And so I'm taking interviews with them, I'm bringing them into my new book, which I'm writing on now. And it's fascinating because people assume that vision is just a gift from heaven. You're just walking on a street and all of a sudden a vision stroked you. No, it's a hard work. And what I learned, vision comes when your conscious awareness of a certain problem reaches its peak. So it's a result of a hard work in realizing that it is important to solve the problem, you envisioning how this problem will be solved.
So envisioning how the problem will be solved.
Yeah, of course. A certain problem. So not yours, but people's problem. Leaders, it's, when I look at culture as a leadership function, what I'm saying always, culture is not about you, it's not about me, it's about what we do for others. So leaders, what they do? Leaders are serving others. And so their vision is about others, not about themselves. They're taking huge responsibility when they're declaring their vision. From that moment, they're simply signing a new code of conduct. They're responsible for everything. And the people are not prepared to take it. That's a sad story. But those who are prepared, those who are willing to put themselves or, invest all their life into something important, they're making that huge difference. Okay. They become visionaries.
So maybe we'll just use me as an example.
Okay.
So my vision is to secure the lives of 1 billion people.
Yeah.
And
fantastic.
So it has people I'm just looking at the elements of what you just said because I'm like, oh, okay. I'm immediately when you're talking, I'm like, oh, I got to look at my own. But that literally is, I'm not securing the bank. I always tell people I am securing the bank as a metaphor, but the bank might have 100,000 customers.
Yeah.
So my real win is the bank customers winning and interoperating with that institution. So that would be 50,000 on the way to 1 billion.
Can we redraft it slightly differently?
Yes, let's.
You are raising the level of trust in operations or interaction between the bank and people, so you're making their life easily because you're putting your stamp on it. That all is proved. Guys, act safely. No problem. Because you are winning in this sense. So you're not just lowering the transaction costs. You making people's life easier. Okay? So therefore, you should ask people before you produce something. Guys, in your terms, where would you think I need to improve? Right? And you're scanning for the environment, which is a second element. What's going on around you, how the technologies are changing, how you could scale this to a greater extent. So because vision never accepts a dead end. It always has a potential for extension. Then as we talked about spotlight, which is a responsibility, you putting your name on the line with this license, security license. Okay? Then we talk about a very important aspect, which is simplicity. Right? It must be simple and so realistic and reliable. Isn't that?
Yes. It's interesting the way you approach it, though, because what I love is that the simplicity, simple and reliable.
Yeah.
I actually can't see that vision. Like that vision is so big that it's a guiding light. But it requires that, because then the next question is how? Well, by building corporate immune systems. And so I want to build that by building corporate immune systems that will actually handle a lot of the complexity in a simple manner. And that thus means that over time, there's going to be more automation built in, and there's going to be these inventions that we've created, these helper tools will be organized and orchestrated very similar to the DNA model. So I don't know the actual steps. All I know is that we're going there. And so that's interesting. And I just wonder, as you're talking with leaders, am I going down a path that you would say, yes, Bill, that's the right way to think about it? Or would you push me in a certain other direction?
I would tell you something. This is a very strong element of this construct is your excitement and passion. If you really passionate about solving such and such problem, and you found the solution for it, who could push you out of your way? No one. Because you know that you will fight for it, you will bet for it. You put everything on it because that's important for people. Here comes a difference. It's very easy to understand because the difference between real leaders and just a boss. Because I never seen anyone with a huge ego and people who are attracted by someone's big ego. I don't think you ever met such person.
No, I don't think that would exist.
No. So we know that there are a lot of people with a huge egos, but
Sure.
no one is attracted by this ego. But what happens in real life, people are attracted by passion in a good way.
Okay.
So if you're really passionate, if you're really excited, about something which would make people's lives better, and that more likely to be a vision.
I see. So that's an interesting, as people are listening and as to people around the globe that are going to be listening to this, tapping into what you're saying is tapping into excitement and enthusiasm and passion. That is a leverage point for leaders. They really have to explore. It seems
Yes.
they have to explore what makes them excited, and they can't look for externals to make them passionate, excited. That actually has to come from inside them, it would seem, right?
What wakes you up at the middle of the night? Passion and craving to find solutions. That keeps you awake, right? If just a worry about to make your bank account, just like with extra zero, it's a bit different. Very, very different.
I would agree with that. Well, this is fantastic. I know we've reached the end of our time where we wanted to cover these concepts, Oleg, and it's been really quite fascinating. And I wanted to ask you, just as we wrap up, is there any particular theme or any particular thing that, as we're talking today, that you were like, you know what, if Bill gives me the opportunity to wrap up, I want to cover that concept. Is there anything that you want to leave my audience with here today?
First of all, Bill, thank you very much for inviting me, and it's a great honor. And my message is simple. We at the moment are witnessing, and so we are strongly involved in a very critical shift in leadership, because we are moving from leadership as a function to leadership as a system of growing people. Therefore, we need to use all our knowledge, all our vision, all our qualities to help each other grow. And that's a tremendous shift which is happening at the moment, which is going on without even us noticing it. But all goes towards it. And that's a reality which we are already facing. And those who will catch with it first will win in a big way. That would be a message.
So
thank you.
So basically, the shift of the future is leadership, or now the leaders that are helping people grow and helping within the constructs we talked about with culture and learning and such. That's what's going to give in their own personal and sharing that passion and through in learning. That's going to actually help the modern leaders that you're coaching and you're spending time with.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to really encourage everybody to get Leaderology, and Oleg, I'm going to put that on the show notes, a link to that. So
thank you very much.
Others can. I really got a lot of value from reading these sections, and as I mentioned before we got started, I think sometimes it's really important to leaders to get out of the grind and read provoking books that really force a wiring in the brain in a different way, and that's what your book achieved. For me. So I appreciate that.
Bill, thank you very much. It was a great honor to talk, and I love your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Okay, until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously, and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.